First of all, Secretary, thank you so much. I want everybody to realize that she made a major effort to be with us here today. She's flown in this afternoon and will be flying back tonight because her schedule is so jam-packed this week that she just couldn't stay around with us, and I just really want to express our deep appreciation for your comments, but also by being here you symbolize how committed you are to working in partnership with all of us, and we appreciate that. I also want to tell you you have a wonderful team. I've had the fun of working with Mike Inch now for 25 years, watched as he evolved and took on increasing responsibilities, and you are most ably served by Mary Cologne. It's a great team. We really appreciate so much the opportunity to work with you and appreciate that a lot. I also want to say that we'll be introducing Will Shafroth, but Will is also making this extraordinary commitment to symbolizing the importance of this topic about working as partners to make the outdoors relevant to all Americans. And he too has flown in and will be flying out. And I think your schedule is sort of like a yo-yo this week. You go back to Washington, then go out to California, and he's about ready to cast aside his title. He's going to shorten his title. He's the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, soon to be Acting Assistant Secretary. So we're delighted that you're here with us. We'll go on and talk more about that. But we really appreciate both of you being here. My job is to begin, first of all, with a big thank you. This program is put on every year by an extraordinary team of people. We call it the Partners Outdoors Steering Committee. A number of you are in the room that gather to think through how we can make this program relevant for all of us, how we can conspire to attract the kind of presenters and participants that make this year after year a source of what I refer to as an exergenic kind of meeting. We have some meetings are sort of, you put lots of energy in and you get nothing out. This meeting consistently develops a enthusiasm level that allows us. So first of all, can I ask the Partners Outdoor Steering Committee members who are here to stand up so we can say thank you? I also want to thank specifically the Corps for their role in being a host for us here today. Colonel, your team has done a wonderful job and had such a great story to tell, so we're very excited about this. I'd also like to explain how Partners Outdoors began and what we have to live up to in the way of a tradition in terms of Partners Outdoors. As the Secretary pointed out, we've been meeting since 1991, and we have a clear purpose, and that's to remind ourselves about how partnerships between private and public sector organizations have contributed so much to making America's great outdoors a prized and shared legacy, and to catalyze new partnership activities that will allow this kind of role of the great outdoors to continue. I trace the origins of this meeting back to the President's Commission on Americans Outdoors from '85 to '87, where, like AGO, dozens of hearings were held across the country with people coming forward to describe what they hoped America's great outdoors could be in the future. We had an incredible band of leaders, from Mo Udall to Sheldon Coleman to Lamar Alexander to Gil Grosvenor, Pat Noonan, Will LePage, listening. I had the fun of being one of the 15 commissioners, and let me tell you, I learned to keep my mouth closed and to listen because there were so many very visionary people that were involved. And out of our recommendations came the impetus for greenways and blueways, byways, for volunteers, for tapping into the Highway Trust Fund, now $2 billion a year that go into recreation-related programs, for a variety of other kinds of things. And it embraced the legacy of public-private partnerships, including the tradition of concessioners on national parklands and ski areas on national forests. Some 60% of all skiing in this country occurs on national forests, through an extraordinary partnership between the public and the private sector. And the leadership by a number of individuals in terms of making this happen, including then Vice President George H.W. Bush, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. In 1990, the 50th anniversary of Mount Rushmore occurred, and then President George Bush convened a group of Americans, including members of the President's Commission on Americans Outdoors, and key leaders of federal recreation organizations, including Jim Ridenauer of the Park Service, Dale Robertson of the Forest Service, and we had a very great discussion about frustration, the barriers. We all talked partnerships, but we found moving from talk to action was a complex kind of a process. And so the decision came to assemble the current and future leaders drawn from agencies and companies to a meeting that Disney would host down at Walt Disney World to share ideas, to share information, to explain the limitations and the opportunities that we had. To move from organocentrism, if you will, to a focus on our common customer, the nearly 2 billion recreation visits that occur to America's public lands every year. The first Partners Outdoors was held at Walt Disney World in January 1991, and we learned a lot. We learned that the words we use in the private sector, like marketing, were not received with a great deal of enthusiasm by many of the employees of public agencies, federal and state. And we focused on one opportunity, the upcoming 50th anniversary of Smokey Bear. What we decided was we needed to work in partnership on that. By the time we left Walt Disney World, the idea had gone from idea to reality to create a hot air balloon for Smokey Bear. A leading RV manufacturer donated the rig to bring the hot air balloon across the country, and that balloon now, since 1991, has made tens of thousands of appearances at state fairs and a variety of other kinds of things. We attended Traditions 101 at Walt Disney World and learned Disney speak about guests and cast members and entertainment companies, but it was a good way for us to understand more about people and capital management and apply that to our common goal. And then we reported back to the agency heads in Washington with some recommendations and decided to continue the meeting and, importantly for this group, to decide to add a left-out organization. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was not part of the original list of invitees, and I'm now embarrassed to say that despite all of the tours of this nation and everything else, many of us just were blind to the important role that the Corps was playing. We held 5 more of the meetings at Walt Disney World, and then we moved on to Snowbird. And a shout out to our friends from Snowbird. Bob Bonar over here is the COO and president of Snowbird, and has hosted 2 of these Partners Outdoors and shown us how working in partnership with the Forest Service, literally 1 million people a year can benefit from what happens in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And we moved on and we met at the BLM National Training Center in Phoenix and at Lake Arrowhead, California, focusing on the needs of kids. And last year had an extraordinary meeting hosted by the Park Service at Cavallo Point. That discussion focused on health, and other focuses have included the National Recreation Lake System concept. In fact, a National Commission looked at the large number of man-made, federally managed lakes and called them resources of opportunity, emphasizing how, in fact, they could be advanced to serve this nation even better. So starting with Smokey Bear and moving on, we've had a tradition of action. One of the other highlights of this organization, of this meeting, was the program Wonderful Outdoor World, led largely by Dan and Rhoda Glickman. Dan, then the Secretary of Agriculture, worked with us to put in place a program that takes urban youth from 7 cities on their first overnight experience right in the heart of the city, using a trailer loaded with tents and sleeping bags and lanterns and other kinds of things, and is highlighted by a small group of those kids after having not only done their first camp out and then a more in-depth view of the great outdoors, actually riding horses as part of the Tournament of Roses parade. We've also guided research, joint research done for us by Roper, looking at key issues. We've looked at youth technology in the great outdoors at Griffith Park, looking at how we can enlist things like digital cameras and GPS technology and a variety of other kinds of things to make the outdoors fun for the current generation of kids. Last year was a signature event. We focused on health and the great outdoors. We had Dr. Michael Suku with us here today and has been an extraordinary leader in this area now for a decade, joined by Doctors Daphne Miller, Zach Taylor, Stephen Lockhart, plus Kaiser Permanente and a variety of others. And together they initiated a project known as Park Prescriptions. If you have not seen the case studies of medical organizations and doctors across this country, they're now prescribing to youth and to adults time in the outdoors and monitoring that as an alternative to pills and other interventions. I encourage you to look on your flash drives because that report is there. We also were able to tie in the health issue using the receptivity of the U.S. Corps and the Department of Interior through the AGO process. And in fact, in April of this year, the Park Service will host an important gathering in San Francisco called Healthy Parks, Healthy People USA 2011, which could well be the start of an extraordinary new initiative. There are lots of new frontiers. Secretary Darcy mentioned education. We're delighted to have Stephen Waltz with us, the exciting superintendent of Virginia's second largest school district, to talk about what he envisions in terms of linking kids to the outdoors. But as we look at health, we recognize just how much of an opportunity there is. 16.6% of our GDP now goes to our health care. And the Surgeon General tells us that 70% of the total cost of health care is associated with chronic illnesses that are lifestyle induced.